mine. I've known him during the time that from when we moved to Novato, the first year, Shabbos, we didn't yet have a minyan, we didn't yet have services. I would spend time with Chaim. I learned the ropes of being a successful Chabad rabbi from him, but I still have a lot to learn. Rabbi Chaim has the most beautiful Chabad in Northern California. He set the bar high, and every time I've been to his community, his people in his community are so welcoming, friendly, and they are the embodiment of what their rabbi is. And the rabbi is an embodiment of what the Rebbe is. So with that, I want to give it over to a friend of mine, Rabbi Chaim Zaklos from Chabad of Solano County, to please inspire us. All of you are also welcome to ask questions to Rabbi Chaim. He's great off the cuff answering questions about the Rebbe, about stories. So we'll ask Rabbi Chaim to give some opening words. I'll ask some questions, and all of you are welcome to do that as well. Rabbi Chaim, we're giving it over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi Menachem. I'll still never forget where I was when I received that first phone call from Menachem. I at that point had no idea who this person was. I was sitting in my sister-in-law's house in Crown Heights. I guess I was visiting for the summer and a few weeks, and I get this call saying that we want to start Chabad in Novato. And here we are, what is it, 12 years later?
10 years later, yeah.
10 years later. And it's really beautiful to see the community that was created over there by the Landas, him and his wife, and seeing what you have all come on here today for a regular Tuesday afternoon. True, it's Rabbi's secular birthday, but I don't think that's what he's celebrating here tonight. But to see the enthusiasm in the faces and the camaraderie that's being shared here even on screen is so heartwarming, honestly. Novato, as far as I knew when we moved here, was an hour away, and one of our community members had a daughter there. And that's the extent that I knew of what Novato was, even though that it's probably more upper class than Vacaville, and it's part of Marin and Marin County. So much beautiful nature over there as well. So I'm going to have to take you take a journey there once and spend Shabbos there. And I know that you guys have done an amazing job with building community over there and building the bricks and mortar of community over there. Anyway, that being said, but we're not together in bricks and mortar. We are here on Zoom. So what does this have to do with the farbrengen? So, how should I put it? A farbrengen, I think, is precisely appropriate for Zoom. And I'll tell you why. Because a farbrengen essentially is a gathering of souls. It's when we drop the physical or the physical part of our being that so divides us and separates us from one another in body and in heart. And a farbrengen is what I like to call, it's a AA meeting, except with a little bit of alcohol. It's a time when people get together and really share what's on their heart and what's most important in life. And we fuse together despite our separation of bodies. And in that way, a Zoom gathering of our farbrengen should only be with Chabad. The Chabad Hasidic movement is chapter 32, and he starts off that chapter with precisely these words: that what is most important in life is putting a stress on our souls and not on our bodies. That is what a farbrengen is all about, putting a bigger emphasis on our soul and less emphasis on our body and everything that our body desires and is drawn to. Instead, what our soul is so seeking, which is spirituality and meaning. Rabbi Menachem, do you want to do it as a real style farbrengen? And the way I'm used to a farbrengen is it is a conversation, but no pressure.
So for sure, absolutely. But what does that mean? An emphasis on the soul and not on the body? Like, how do you do that? How do you? Where do you start?
Where do you start? That is fantastic, because after all, what a farbrengen really is all about is not a lecture, a theoretical, but it's actually putting these ideas into practice. So we have to figure out how to put an emphasis on our soul. So for everybody, their soul is expressed in a different way. And we have to find those areas where our soul is most prevalent in our life. What we know it's not. We know is very, very well exactly what our body is. So in some ways, you know what not to be focused on, which is our physical pursuits of money, of honor, of pleasure, physical pleasure. But we're looking for something that is a little bit just above it all. You know, the way to define spirituality, I guess the simplest way, is something that can't be tapped on with one of our five senses, with our sight, with our hearing, with our taste, with our smell, with our touch. So how then can we, I guess this is a general question, how do we relate to something spiritual that is so unrelatable? We can't touch it. And what are we all getting together over here about something that's so theoretical? But we all know that it's not so. That spirituality is something very, very much part of our life. In fact, we need to feed our spiritual side as much, and if not more, than as we need to feed our physical life. We know what it feels like when we but we're not taking care of ourselves spiritually. So spirituality, how do we define that? That's a good question, Menachem. Help me out over here. How do we relate to something spiritual that we can't touch with one of our five senses?
Steve Ellman, you have any? Steve Ellman is a descendant of Rav Kook.
Uh-huh.
So he has a spiritual touch to him. Steve, you have any inspiration there? How do you tap into something spiritual?
Thank you. Highs you want to tap into, maybe like the gift to the giver. So spirituality is tapping into that which is not physical, but in an appreciative kind of way, I guess.
Let me share with you, thank you, something that's coming to mind as you're talking. And one of the things that I've been very fortunate with my age, I've been very fortunate to be able to meet the Rebbe in person. And one of the reasons that people were so drawn to the Rebbe is because while spirituality is so not tangible, when you met the Rebbe, you felt that it was very tangible. I was a young boy. I was born in 1983, and I was lucky enough that I'm probably from the last young kids who probably can still say that they remember vividly meeting the Rebbe. And as a young child of 7, 8, I remember the first time meeting him probably in 1989, 1990. In those years, 6, 7, 8, 9, I have very, very precious memories that I dig back into them every so often when I would like to go down memory lane and be inspired. I bring myself back to those moments of encountering with the Rebbe, meeting the Rebbe in person. The Rebbe was one of those very special leaders who gave an opportunity for everybody and anybody to meet him. There was the famous lines that used to stretch for hours on Sunday morning. And I remember standing in that line. As a child, everything seems much bigger, so much longer. I remember standing in that line, what seemed for eternity, to meet the Rebbe. And obviously, as a family coming from Detroit and traveling 12 hours in a station wagon, if you guys remember what that was, with my entire family, the anticipation and the buildup that was created in the family to go meet the Rebbe was something very unique. The Rebbe was a big part of our childhood life, this spiritual saintly leader, and very much part of every decision that was made in my family. So finally getting to meet him was something extraordinary. We used to go in every few months into New York to meet the Rebbe. One of my favorite things was to go to the back of the shul, which was a little bit less congested and less packed as it was closer up to the front, and stand at the end of one of the rows of the pews over there. It wasn't exactly pews, it was benches. And the Rebbe would walk back into his room down the aisle. And I would stand there with my brother and wait for him to get to our row, and stand there at the end of the row to be able to share our special wishes to him. It was Shabbos, so we would wish him a good Shabbos, and hoping that he would notice us and respond to us good Shabbos. Never forget the jealousy that I had for my older brother, who had more chutzpah than I did. I was this shy little kid who wouldn't open up my mouth, never mind to a Rebbe who, when you were in his presence, that was probably more than anything else, was his presence. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But my older brother, who had the chutzpah to share with him, good Shabbos, Rebbe. And the Rebbe responding and nodding to him, saying good Shabbos. But me, when I shared the good Shabbos, I guess wasn't important enough, or God forbid, everybody's important to the Rebbe, but I didn't, pronounce my voice, project my voice enough to be able to have that, have him hear it. So I don't remember him responding to me. But I'll never forget the aura that meeting the Rebbe was like. And I'll share with you a personal conversation that I had with him, or the lack thereof, in a moment. But I just want to talk about the spiritual feeling of even a 6 and 7-year-old child was able to feel being in his presence. I probably was standing 4 feet away from him and watching him walk down that aisle. I'll never forget looking into his face, almost as radiant as the sun, where you look away because you just can't look at it. As a young child, there was just something so, I guess the only word that you can use was spiritual, holy. Just something so perfect about every strand of his beard, of his radiant smile, and his eyes, that I remember just looking away. He was an older man. He was
interesting in the Torah, Chaim, when it says, when Moshe came down after receiving the set of tablets, the luchot, it says that kikaran panav, that his face was so shine, so glowing. Moshe's
people
face,
couldn't look at it.
People had to turn away also. Wow.
Right. I didn't even put those two together, but I just remember as from the. I mean, I'm talking simply, strip away the Chabad rabbi over here. This is a 6-year-old, 7-year-old child going back into those through those eyes, the eyes of a 6-year-old child. Of course, we were built up about who this man was, but it was nothing more of an encounter of a 6-year-old child and this older 9-year-old man. Him walking, and every step of his, there was something just so. I don't want to over exaggerate it, but just allow me to indulge. As a 6-year-old child, there was just something so perfect about every step that he took. There was a sense of confidence, and a certain sense of serenity around him. Yes, holiness, but uplifting sense of pride, sense of you're in the right place at the right time. So, even a 6-year-old child who definitely cannot put into words and can't describe a sense of spirituality, I do remember that there was something of otherness, something of another world, otherworldly. And that was something that obviously attracted so many people. You came there and you were blown away. You were overwhelmed by a certain sense of, this is not just another human being walking the earth. This is a gift from God. This is a gift from heaven for our generation to be able to relate to. So I had this little competition with my brothers. I'm one of 8, and above me is a brother, and above him is a brother, and above him is a brother. We're 4 boys and 4 girls. So we were a row of 4 boys, one right after the next. My oldest brother was born in 1977. Next brother born in 1979, then in 1981, and I was born in 1983. So we're 2 years apart approximately. And you can imagine the fights that would go on in the house between us brothers. And it was always like a little competition between such close in age brothers, everybody contributing their uniqueness. My oldest brother, may his soul rest in peace, was extremely audacious and very outgoing. And then there was the rest of us 3, a little bit shyer, and I was especially, after 4, I was completely I was, I guess, spoiled by those brothers, but I never had to fend for myself because my older brothers took it. So I was kind of the shy one tagging along the older brothers. And actually, my brother right above me had a birthday yesterday. And we used to go to visit the Rebbe always around this holiday, this or event on the Chabad calendar. The SHevat is the ceremony, the anniversary of the Rebbe's leadership. Today is the 72nd. I remember very clearly the 40th anniversary and receiving the Tanya, the green Tanya that I received from the Rebbe, from his holy hand. I remember that event very clearly. But we had a competition between ourselves. We knew that the Rebbe really appreciated talking to kids. And if you would, as a kid, if you would give him some good pieces of news, he would always respond with either, thank you, or better yet, he would give you a second $1. Everybody would get $1, and if you had some good news to share with him, he would give you a second $1. I was raised with the language of Yiddish, which was the language that the Rebbe typically spoke, and I knew how much the Rebbe appreciated children asking for Mashiach. So I had prepared during my long wait online the 4 words that I was going to tell the Rebbe, hoping that I can come away with a second $1 from the Rebbe and show my brothers that I'm, and on par and part of the, major leagues that can get a second $1 from the Rebbe. As I mentioned, my older brother had a birthday, and he always would tell the Rebbe that I just celebrated my birthday, and the Rebbe would give him a second $1 in honor of his birthday. But I was not lucky enough to have a birthday around the time to visit the Rebbe. Neither was I lucky enough to be able to, have any of the other big things, big brother type of things to tell the Rebbe. So the least that I can do is tell the Rebbe how much I want Mashiach as a young kid, and hoping to elicit from the Rebbe some sort of recognition, hoping even maybe to get a second $1. Not that I was looking to buy anything with $1. The $1 was a sacred item as far as I was concerned after that. So I was just going to share with my brothers how wonderful, I was also to be able to get a second $1 of the Rebbe. But I remember like yesterday that I told the Rebbe, I really want Mashiach now in Yiddish, ich will Mashiach jetzt. And as I'm walking closer to the Rebbe, I'm trying to get the words to come out of my mouth clearly. If you ever watch those videos, you got, a split second by the Rebbe, and you had to somehow fit in those words to the Rebbe. Anyway, the words got stuck in my mouth somewhere. And as a young child being right in front of the Rebbe, I was overwhelmed with that feeling that I couldn't even get the words out. And I passed by the Rebbe and got that $1 and felt very dejected and very disappointed in myself that I wasn't able to do what I had set for an hour and a half waiting in line to do. To make a long story short, that was the last time I visited the Rebbe as a healthy Rebbe physically, because shortly, a month and a half later, he fell ill and had a stroke and never came back to his original physical health. So it was always something that was a disappointment to me, except that after I got married in 2008, I got a video of that last encounter with the Rebbe. And I'm listening to all of the people before me and after me go by the Rebbe, and everybody gets that same blessing from the Rebbe. May you have blessings and success, bracha v'atzlacha. And when I pass by, while you can't hear me say anything, or definitely you can't put together what I was trying to say, you see that I'm attempting to do something, but the Rebbe immediately, without a blink of an eye, responds to me, Amen, which you all know what that means. You want Mashiach now? Amen, may he come very soon. So to me, that was more than anything else, a acknowledgement, a nod of the head from the Rebbe that he was spiritually in tune with me and knew exactly what I was going through. So whenever I question or need a little bit of feeling of what spirituality can mean, I think of the Rebbe as a great symbol of what that is.
Amazing, Chaim. And as you were saying that everyone was trying to give nachas, just as we try to give nachas to our parents, to our spouses, as children, and even now we try to give nachas to our Rebbe. I remember in the early 90s, we were all trying to find ways to bring nachas to the Rebbe, and we would write different things or reports of what we were doing to bring nachas. And a story that stands out of a young child that he also wanted to give nachas to the Rebbe, and he wrote to the Rebbe that his morning blessings that he would say, usually he would say it on the way to school. Either he was running late, but in honor of the Rebbe, he decided he's going to wake up 5 minutes earlier and do the blessings from a siddur in his house before rushing out to school. He would do it properly from a siddur. And the Rebbe's response to him was, I'm so thankful to this. K'mayim kar al nefesh hayefa. You've brought like cold water on a tired soul. The nachas that this young child was able to bring to the Rebbe. And I find that amazing. So Chaim, I know we only have you for another half an hour, and you have so much gems to share. So I'm going to share one story, and I'm going to try to open you up. And first, I'll say another l'chaim, and that way we could gain as much as we can from your inspiration. One of the stories that, as we ponder Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat, this date on the calendar that marks when our Rebbe became Rebbe. For me, it's almost like an anniversary is that time when you celebrate with your spouse. On a similar note, Yud Shvat is a time when you strengthen your relationship with the Rebbe. Now, whether we have met the Rebbe physically, as Chaim just shared his beautiful story, or not, each and every one of us have a connection to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe, the way we see the Rebbe and the way the Rebbe himself said, that the leader of the Jewish people, there's a spark of the leader in every single Jew. Every single Jew of that generation is connected with the Rebbe of that generation. So just a little, I would say probably my favorite story of the Rebbe is in the early 80s, 1982 or 83. It was shortly after the Rebbe finished what's known as Yichidus, the private audiences, when people would have that private time alone with the Rebbe in his office. My mother, who's actually on the Zoom, had several of them where she was able to have a conversation in French with the Rebbe, sitting face to face, and the Rebbe was able to guide her on personal things that she needed help with at the time. My older brother also was able to merit that. But around 80, 81, there was too many people asking for a time, and people's appointments to meet the Rebbe was like 6 months out, a year out. So in the later 80s, the way Chaim was expressing is, it became known as the Sunday morning dollars, when people were able to come and have a moment with the Rebbe. And if they had a quick, urgent question, they were able to ask it then. Otherwise, they would just get a blessing from the Rebbe. But in the early 80s, it was after the private audience has stopped, but before the Sunday morning dollars started, So there was a person, he was not a Chabadnik, but he really had a desperate question that he needed to ask the Rebbe of a family matter. But he wasn't a chassid. He didn't know where to find that moment with the Rebbe. So he had a friend who was a Chabadnik, and the friend said, after the Rebbe, as Chaim was saying, by the path, after the Rebbe would finish the prayer service and he's going back to his office, utilize that time in front of the Rebbe's office to ask your personal question. But by the time the Rebbe was there was a commotion, there was a bunch of Hasidim following. He didn't get that moment that he was hoping for with the Rebbe. So his friend said, you know what, it's not going to work here in 770 by the Rebbe's office. Tomorrow morning, outside of the Rebbe's home on President Street, that is a very quiet area. No one disturbs the Rebbe near his house. I suggest going to the Rebbe, waiting outside his house. And before the Rebbe gets into the car and is driven to 770 for morning prayers, utilize that moment with the Rebbe alone to ask what you need. And that's exactly what he did. He stood outside in the morning and the Rebbe came out and they had a conversation for like 10 minutes. He stood there talking to the Rebbe. And it was incredibly helpful for what he needed, for what his family needed to hear. He got a blessing from the Rebbe. And as he finished, the Rebbe left. And then there was yeshiva boys, Bachrim, who were there monitoring the Rebbe's moves. And they ran over to this person and they say, that's not how it's done. You don't just stop the Rebbe on the street and have a conversation with him, make the Rebbe stand for 15 minutes just for your own selfish needs, and then make all the people waiting for prayers at 770 delay because of you. It's not how it's done. So he felt bad. So this person, he penned a letter that very same day to the Rebbe, apologizing. First saying, thank you, Rebbe, so much. Your advice was really helpful for my family. But also I was educated by the yeshiva boys. That's not how it's done. So I apologize to the Rebbe for taking your time. And the Rebbe's response was, first of all, I want to know who those yeshiva boys were. They had no permission being outside of Seder. They had to be studying. They weren't supposed to be on the streets. And second of all, the Rebbe says, how dare they try to take away this opportunity from me? Perhaps the reason of my whole neshama, my soul's descent into this world, was for those 10, 15 minutes to be of service to you, for that ahavat Yisrael, for that love, for that kindness that I was showing to you for those moments. How dare they try to take that away from me? And I really find that to be really summing up the ahavat Yisrael, the love, which the Rebbe actually encouraged on the 10th of Shvat to speak about ahavat Yisrael, to speak about the love that is imperative we need to have for each other. And as Chaim said, that's exactly what a farbrengen, especially on Zoom, it's a coming together of souls. When we see each other from a soul perspective, we're able to truly mirror ourselves, and your benefit, your good is my good, and I celebrate your success. I'm truly there for you in your times of need. The Rebbe wanted everyone to know the love that his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, had for every single Jew. And in the first Maimer, the Rebbe actually shares stories from each of the Rebbes about their incredible ahavat Yisrael, their love that we're supposed to have for others.
Rabbi Menachem, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
You reminded me of one of my favorite Rebbe stories. It's not a miracle one, but it's one of my favorite stories.
Let me hear.
It has to do with a person by the name of Rabbi Weinberg. Rabbi Weinberg was a man who had a very long-standing relationship with the Rebbe and needed something urgent to be put into the Rebbe's hands before the end of the day. So he ran to the Rebbe's secretary's office to see if perhaps he can get the secretary before he enters the Rebbe's room and get that paper along with all of the stack of papers that the secretary would bring in at the end of the day for the Rebbe to look over during the night. Long story short, he gets to the secretary's office and he missed it by a few minutes. Missed it by a few minutes meant that the secretary was already in the Rebbe's office and he has to somehow get the paper into the Rebbe's hands before the Rebbe leaves for the day. So he came up with a scheme. What he's going to do, since the Rebbe's door was closed, he took a note, he took a piece of paper that he wanted to give the Rebbe, he took the note and stuck it into the door with the door jam. He wouldn't have the chutzpah, the audacity to open the Rebbe's door of his office without permission. So what he was hoping was that he puts that piece of paper into the door, so automatically when the secretary comes out of the office, he'll notice that piece of paper drop. He'll pick it up and hand it to the Rebbe. Except his scheme worked just with one small little mistake. Instead of the secretary noticing the piece of paper, the secretary walked out of the office without even noticing the paper drop. Who noticed the paper? The Rebbe noticed the paper. So he's witnessing this with his own eyes, that as the Rebbe's about to leave for the day, the secretary walks out, ignores misses the piece of paper, goes back to his office, and the Rebbe bends down from the height of his age. He bends down, picks up the paper, and addresses it in a timely fashion. You can imagine that this Rabbi Weinberg felt that it was a little bit, how should I say, inappropriate that he made the Rebbe have to bend down. Somebody of such holy stature to have to make him bend down, especially at such an age, he just felt that it was inappropriate. So he penned the letter to the Rebbe asking for apologies, similar to the one that Rabbi Menachem shared, for having to make the Rebbe bend down and lift up the piece of paper. And these were the words that the Rebbe responded, which sums up what a Rebbe's job is in the Rebbe's own words. The Rebbe says, behold, what you claim to have been inappropriate for me to do was in fact precisely what my job is all about. What is my job? Aufheben, to uplift. Ubefrat, das was andere übergucken, especially those and that which others overlook. Isn't this story summing up the Rebbe saying in his own words precisely what my job is? Here you had my secretary who overlooked that piece of paper dropping to the ground, and there I was able to lift it up. That is exactly what I do all the time. The Rebbe once shared with somebody, Rabbi Gershon Jacobson, who was a journalist and an editor of the famous Allgemeiner Journal newspaper. He was once asked, Rebbe, why do you always take on projects that sometimes are controversial, are uncharted territory, areas that everybody else in the general Jewish the Egyptian smiting the Jew, and he looks one way and the other way, and the Rebbe asks, what do you think he was looking in both ways for? To see if no one would be looking at him? You think Moses was intimidated? Moses wasn't intimidated to stand up for what was right. What he was looking in both ways was to see if anybody else would stand up to the plate. And when he noticed that a Jew was being overlooked and was being beaten, and no one else was standing up for what was right, for justice, Moses stands up for what is right and what is necessary. And here the Rebbe fine-tunes that job of his even more precisely, that it's not just standing up for anything right, but precisely for that which is to uplift. And I just want to share with you, Rabbi Menachem, if you allow me the floor another few moments before you interrupt me. Please interrupt me. I was just reading a letter earlier this morning. It was probably one of the most powerful letters that I read in a while. The Rebbe writes to a certain person that since the sin of the tree of knowledge, what we call the original sin, right? Everything is a mixture of good and bad, including human beings. There is no human being who is completely bad. You can't write anybody off. And for that same token, there's no one who's perfectly good. Now, there are two approaches. I won't spend time explaining the other approach because it's not the Hasidic approach. The Hasidic approach, you can just, the other approach you'll understand is the exact opposite of the Hasidic approach, is to focus on the good and strengthen and put emphasis on the good and bring them up. Everybody has the ability to contribute their talents and what they have good. And it's a job of the Rebbe is to highlight, is to put a magnifying glass on that which we have good in our life, in our psyche, in our personality, highlight it, strengthen it. And the Rebbe says, when you put emphasis on the good, when you uplift, everything negative just falls to the wayside, either with little effort or with no effort at all. Putting the emphasis on the good of every person, on yourself and on others.
Wow, Chaim, that's amazing. I'm going to segue the conversation now talking about, for those of us that have not met the Rebbe and hearing these beautiful stories, how would you say the relationship, and SHevat, we celebrate the relationship with the Rebbe. What does a relationship with the Rebbe look like when we can't write these beautiful, receive these beautiful responses from the Rebbe, when we can't get that letter in and have the Rebbe see it with his physical eyes? What does a relationship look like for those of us now?
Coming back to the earlier conversation brings us straight into the answering your question. We mentioned earlier that a farbrengen is a gathering of souls. And we spoke about how possibly for me, one of the best ways of tapping into our spirituality is tapping into our Rebbe. The Rebbe used to quote the Tanya chapter 27 in the holy letters of the Alter Rebbe. He addresses this precisely this question to a group of students of Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Haradok who just lost their Rebbe. And his point over there is that a relationship with the Rebbe, with a Rebbe, is one of spirit. You see, if you put too much emphasis on the physical, then it all ends with death. But as we know, death is not the end, but it's a transition. It's a transition into the next world, but the soul continues to live on. However, for most of us, where I guess I'll just talk for myself, our spiritual life maybe contains 20, 30% of our conscious moments in a good day, and the other 70% of our conscious time is involved and engaged in materialistic pursuits. So then when our materialistic life ends, that 70% is gone, and what's left is that little bit of hanging here of what we were living eternally continues to live on in the next world and in this world. However, a Rebbe who his whole life is one of spirit. His body that he contains during this physical lifetime is nothing mere of a container in which to express his spiritual pursuits, to express his spiritual life. So when somebody encountered a Rebbe, he didn't see his physical being. As I, as a 6-year-old, was able to sense it, it was a spiritual encounter. I felt like I was meeting a saintly man, a spiritual man. Well, in that case, that doesn't end at the end of his physical life. That continues, and as the Alter Rebbe so brilliantly says it, it actually intensifies. It only gets stronger. And as can be seen here, we are a gathering of people in honor of the special day of SHevat, the Rebbe's day, who has been gone almost 30 years now, close to 30 years. And 90% of us have never actually met the Rebbe, or definitely not in a conscious way. I have to acknowledge somebody over here who goes down in the annals of Chabad history in Northern California, Dr. Yisrael Sapin, who actually received a letter from the Rebbe addressed to you. Is that correct? Dr. Sapin, I'm assuming it's more than just one.
Several, yes, thank you.
2. So here we have somebody who actually encountered the Rebbe, but besides him, and maybe I hear that the rabbi's mother is here, most of us have not met him in our adult life. And yet we're gathered here because of his legacy, or as somebody put it, the Rebbe did not leave a legacy, the Rebbe left marching orders. And all of us, the Rebbe continues to live on through our actions. The Rebbe's spiritual life continues to live on. What's my point? My point is that I for one can be here and say it clearly. I have a relationship with the Rebbe, albeit a spiritual one, and I feel the Rebbe's guidance to me in my personal and my communal life in a very, very tangible way. And it's available for everybody. I just want to take the audacity to say that about a month ago, I had exactly this conversation with a community member. And telling people and continues to live on as the head of the Jewish people. And I wasn't sure how my words resonated with him or the lack thereof, except last Friday night, he came again and he said, I have something to share, because we went around the table and I said, if anybody can share what the Rebbe means to them, how the Rebbe has impacted them. And he says, Rabbi, a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had this conversation about having a relationship with the Rebbe after the Rebbe had passed away. And I have to say that I took you up on it. And I had a conversation with the Rebbe. And this guy, he's not a superstitious type of guy, and he's not this hoop type of guy. He's a doctor. He works for Kaiser, a very successful doctor. And he tells me, he says, I was having a conversation with the Rebbe about the fact that here I am pursuing my new spiritual life, involved with Chabad, and trying to figure out where I fit into this whole picture. And maybe in order to pursue a spiritual life, I have to abandon my career, my practice. And then the Rebbe's words came to me. And this is what he tells me. He says, every person is like a part in this body. Just like you have many different limbs in a body, each one serving a different purpose, and there are no two of the same. There are those who maybe have to lead in a spiritual sense, to be the spiritual leaders of the community, but then we each have our role to play in the specific career that we have. And I said to him, did you find this in a letter that the Rebbe wrote? Where did you get this from? He says, no, it just came to me. I felt the Rebbe talking to me. Anyway, the only reason why I'm saying all of this is because I just experienced this literally a few days ago when he told me this. Today's Tuesday. It was this past Friday. He told me that he had this awakening, so to speak, this relationship with the Rebbe. And after his father-in-law passed away, the Rebbe said that you have to do your part in communicating with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe will find a way of responding to you. And I guess this guy had the Rebbe's response to him through a message to him in his mind.
It's amazing. Wow, amazing. I want to share a story that it's from the diary of the Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, where this is from 1932. The previous Rebbe was together with the Rebbe. The Rebbe came as the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe. He came to visit. Chaim, was this in where was the previous Rebbe in 1932? Was this in Latvia, in Riga?
Yeah.
So this was in Latvia, and this was December, Kislev of 1932. And the previous Rebbe tells the Rebbe, for the dream that I had last night, bring mashke, bring a bottle, give me a kiss, the previous Rebbe tells the Rebbe, say l'chaim, and begin to learn Chassidus, begin to learn the teachings of Chassidus, of the Chabad. So the Rebbe kissed his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, on the forehead. The previous Rebbe reciprocated. And then he shared the dream. And he tells them that last night, my father, the Rebbe before him, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, appeared to me in my dream and told me and called the previous Rebbe by his name. And he said, Yosef, why are you broken? Your home is bright. This is lichtig, my dear. It's bright by you. So he woke up and he was trying to find the source of the light that his father was talking about. And the moon was shining through his window, but he was sure that was not my father's intention. So I walked around the house, and the previous Rebbe tells the Rebbe that I found you in the library, engrossed in a Torah book studying. And I knew that's the light that the previous Rebbe was talking about. December 1932, for the historians here, you're familiar, it was weeks or a month before Hitler rose to power, the late January 1933. That explains a little bit of the brokenness that the previous Rebbe was feeling, of the plight of the Jewish people. And yet his father, the previous Rebbe's father, was telling him, you already have the answer. You already have the light that could get you through the darkest of times. And without a doubt, in the last half of the 20th century, in the past 72 years, since 1950, from when the Rebbe became a Rebbe, it's no doubt by us, the light is shining so bright, whether it's in Solano County or in Marin County, around the world. But one of the beautiful messages that the Rebbe shares in his opening address as Rebbe, from Basi Lagani, like I mentioned before, a theme that stood forth from that first opening words of the Rebbe as Rebbe and continued throughout the entire leadership of the Rebbe and still continues, is that our job is to finish the job. Our job is to bring Mashiach down here, to bring godly presence, and not just the rays of godliness, but God himself, that he should be back into this world, just the way he was at the beginning of creation with Adam and Eve. And to do that, it's our job. Just like Moses did it by bringing God, first God came down on the mountain, and then they built a home for God. Our job is to bring that home for God. And it happens, you may think, that's talking about giants of Torah. The Rebbe says it's each and every one of our jobs to do this, and it's simple. What you got to do is, in Aramaic terms, in Zohar Kabbalistic terms, is the skafia. You have to hold your impulses from just being out of control. You have to do things that you're wanted for, things that are demanded from you, things that we know you can do. And this is probably my favorite part of the Rebbe's talk. The Rebbe says each and every one of us, even if we don't feel like we signed up for it, we are in this generation. And now is beginning the phase to get the job done. And you may think, my job is to learn Torah. The Rebbe says, if you want your Torah to get through to you, it's only going to work if you teach it to someone else. You may think, Aleph Beis, let someone else teach the Aleph Beis to the kids. I have bigger and better things to do. And the Rebbe says, no, this Aleph Beis that you teach to another will help your deeper Torah from getting and from talking to you. And I think that's an incredible point of the mimer. So I'd like to ask Chaim if he has anything else to share from this opening mimer and from that evening of Yot Shvat, and how we could bring it down today.
Yeah, thank you for directing us back to the first talk of the Rebbe. And I want to share with you a personal impression as a teenager of studying that mimer. And I remember vividly at the tender age of 14, 15 years old, like any teenager has questions, and studying that discourse, that first talk of the Rebbe really touched me very much. and really made me want to join the Rebbe's army and sign up for this. As a teenager, like any teenager, struggling with my own identity, struggling with my own place in the world amongst my colleagues and amongst my fellow classmates, and in the world in general, and what's the meaning and the purpose of it all. Hearing such words of clarity from the Rebbe of our place in history and our job to bring it to the finishing line was so empowering. And if I may say that to me, the Rebbe charted out such clear messages in the first discourse and throughout his history of addressing the ills of our generation. By far, one of the biggest things that our generation is dealing with is we have so much extra time on our hands and we're so consumed with ourselves. And the Rebbe's one of his basic messages is redirect your attention from being on yourself and think about somebody else. In the Hasidic terminology, it's called bittul. Bittul means don't make such a big deal out of yourself. Make God a bigger deal. Let God be, let your life be not self-centered, but God-centered. Be God conscious. And the way the Rebbe did it was quite differently than the way it was done the generations before. And I think it was custom tailored made for our generation. One of the Rebbe's first addresses talks about, and his first address actually, Basel Ligani talks about the idea that we are Tziv Ois Hashem. We are God's soldiers. What is the uniqueness of the job of the career of a soldier? Why is it so different than any other practice? The difference of somebody signing up, as I once saw in somebody's tagline at the end of their email, was when somebody is a veteran, what they have done is that they have signed a check made out to the United States of America for their entire life and beyond. So when somebody signs up for being a soldier, not only are they giving themselves over to the country that they're a soldier of, but actually now they are a property of the country that they're part of, and they represent, therefore, something bigger than themselves. And in a way, that is probably one of the most liberating and invigorating and empowering messages of the Rebbe, is that we are Tzivis Hashem. Let's take a moment to stop thinking about ourselves. Let us see ourselves as representations and as ambassadors of God, there to be of service to others. To be there of service to others. And for that matter, being a servant of God to whatever God expects of us, part of that is addressing your own ills. One of the things as Menachem just mentioned before, people don't see that within ourselves, but only judge us and see us for our good side. But you know what the Rebbe tells us as a teenager? It was so comforting. The Rebbe says, I know we all have it. We all have got those demons. But you know what we're supposed to do? I don't know if demons is the correct word in this context. But he says, take those ills, take those things that we are, our shortcomings in life, and redirect them to being a force of good. The Rebbe was not somebody who was naive to what the ills of our generation are, but the Rebbe saw the youth especially and saw the passion that if we only redirect it into something positive, it can be like fire and not be something destructive. But when fire is directed properly, it can be something warming and enlightening and bringing light to others. So the Rebbe spoke to me as a teenager and still speaks to me as my closed underneath the blanket type of self. The Rebbe says, it's okay. You're okay. You're okay with all of the struggles that you have in life. It's okay. On the contrary, God created you. It's not a mistake. All you have to do is take those issues that you have and invested into being a better person. Let's say somebody wakes up one morning feeling down, feeling depressed, feeling dejected, feeling unwanted, and feeling lonely. Now that's something really harsh to deal with. Take that energy or the lack thereof and pick up the phone and call somebody else and ask them how they're doing. Just genuinely ask them, how's your day coming? For a second, forget about yourself and put yourself into the other person's mind. And you'll see that dejection and depression and loneliness that you've been feeling until now this morning, to use it as something good for others. And you know what at the end of the day happens? You feel better as well. You're taking care of your problems as well thereby. But the Rebbe would always say every gathering of souls, every gathering of human beings has to come out something positive for a third. So therefore, practical. What do they say? The three P's in life that are most important is making life practical. So we have to take something from this gathering and make it practical, because that's where it's all at. That's what's going to really make a difference to ourselves and to the next generation. Doing that one action that from this gathering, we're going to say to ourselves, you know what? The Rebbe's wisdom is actually something that can inspire me and will inspire me. And I'll open up that book that I was keeping on the shelf until now, that thinking it's a little bit removed from my life, and study it. Study the Rebbe's first discourse and find out his inauguration address of how he charted out the path to victory and how we can be a part of it and how we can enlist in our small way of being part of, or maybe big way, we never should underestimate, in being a foot soldier in the Rebbe's army. And you will see that with that extra mitzvah that you take upon yourself to do from this gathering, God willing, before the end of the special event of tomorrow night, which is SHevat of the Rebbe's anniversary, God willing, we'll all be at the front lines to greet Mashiach as part of his great army.
Thank you, Chaim. That was very inspiring, and actually, you just inspired me that everyone who's here, I'll email God willing tomorrow morning a link that just has a little bit of study that you could do from the previous Rebbe's teachings, which today is his yard site, and from the Rebbe's opening discourse, as Chaim just mentioned. So first of all, I want to make a l'chaim to Mali Sue, who's observing the yard site in a few days of her dear father. If I'm not mistaken, it's Daniel ben Binyamin. Did I get it right? Oh, did I freeze?
Benjamin parents, I met him other times.
Oh, right, there you go.
It's on the 12th of the month, and he is his yeah.
Thursday night. So l'chaim is the Shamash Rav and Aliyah. Thank you very much. As Chaim was mentioning about the concept of being humble, of being a conduit, being batel is the Hebrew word. I just came across a beautiful teaching from the second Rebbe of Chassidus. His name was Rabbi Dov Ber. He was known as the Maggid of Mezrich. And is my internet, is it going slow? Oh, you're able to hear me? Oh, okay, you can hear me. So as there's a beautiful teaching I see some of the people on the call are on the Zoom are musically in tuned. So we're going to actually be playing a niggin that I found to be beautiful from an instrument and a musician that I found. Just the niggin is beautiful. But just to give you a little bit of an intro, it says Elisha, who was the disciple of Elijah, Eliyahu Navi, and he was a miracle worker, as he was known. It says that for him to give prophecy, for him to deliver over the words of God, first he would have a musician come, play an instrument, and that would inspire his spirit, and then he would be able to deliver the words of God. But he had to be in a joyous mood, and the music put him in that mood of joy. And the wording actually that the verse says is as follows: V'haya kinagen haminagen. A nigun in Hebrew means a melody. A nagen is an instrument, and minagen is the singer. So the verse kind of repeats the same word, says nagen haminagen, when the instrument would be played by the musician. It almost seems like a repetitive word. So the second Rebbe, he teaches that what happens there is that an instrument, we all know an instrument doesn't have a life on its own. It's just controlled by the musician. So an instrument is completely nullified to whatever is being told for it to do. So when the musician becomes totally in sync, that they're not their own person, they close their eyes and they just play the music, but it's not them developing their own ego of saying, look how good I am, but rather it's the humility that comes as a result of playing the musician, which means they become like the instrument, which is totally humbled and nullified. That's when the music could really play. That's when a person could be in tune with their true self to be humble. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to be playing, it's a 3-minute clip. It's the melody is known as the Beinani. For those that are studying the Tanya with me on Wednesday mornings, the Beinani is the in-between person that the Tanya talks about that struggles, always is working to better themselves. And while they may have struggles in life, they work hard to overcome those struggles. So it's called the Beinani, and it was actually the previous Rebbe's favorite melody. So I'm going to be playing the melody. I'll be sharing my screen. I found the melody to be very soul-stirring, very powerful. And here we go. Wow, I absolutely love that niggin. So with that, we'll say l'chaim. Anyone who wants to unmute and make a l'chaim, you're welcome to. In a few moments, we'll be sharing a video from the Rebbe's first address that Chaim and I were both talking about. So l'chaim, l'chaim. I'd like to also welcome Rabbi Rice, who's joining this farbrengen as well. L'chaim, Rabbi Rice. L'chaim, Joni, it's great to see you. L'chaim, l'chaim. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. You're very kind, Joni, as always. L'chaim Doris from San Francisco. It's great to see you. Thank you for the love. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your donation earlier today. Very much appreciated. You have any teachings, Doris, from Rabbi Nachman on birthdays that you know off the cuff? And l'chaim Madeline, and l'chaim Mark, and l'chaim to my dear mother, who's 3 hours ahead. That's amazing. And l'chaim Vivian. I think, Vivian, it's your granddaughter's birthday also, right? Sasha was also, right? I think
Okay, wow.
Say again, what do you say, Vivian?
It was yesterday, yes.
Yesterday.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank
And l'chaim Frida, and l'chaim Aviva. So right now I'll be sharing a video, and with that we'll conclude. This video is a highlight for me. It has the footage of the previous Rebbe's funeral from 1950. And you have first encounters of people who are describing the first talk of the Rebbe from 1951, January the 10th of SHevat, 1951. And the main theme of that address, I found it to be a very powerful video. And I will play it for everyone. Let me just find it. Yeah, I'm there. Great. So let's see. Should we do this one? Oh, he's still pinned. Thank you. Got it. Okay, so we'll do this one. There's a few beautiful videos, so it's hard to choose, but we'll do this one. Get this big. Okay.
The sixth Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was the Rebbe Rasham's own.
Hold on, it's a little too fast. In this video, we'll have some of the main themes of the 10th of Shvat.
Son. Throughout his letters, talks, and diaries, he documents much of the movement's history as passed down through the generations from one Rebbe to the next. A man of keen perception and deepest emotional expression, he explained on many occasions the importance of the niggun in opening one's heart and mind to understand godly wisdom, describing song as the key to man's connecting with the divine.
And we're just going to skip to this part. Here we go. Oh, you did? Yeah. Oh, good. So this person about to speak, I actually knew him personally from Montreal.
Bei Nacht sind wir gekommen zu verbringen. Der Rebbe ist da reingekommen. Ich habe dem Sieder mit mir ständig, und ich steht und ich habe still getan. Und der Rebbe hat sich weggesetzt, hat gesehen, der Rebbe noch dort. Schön, der Rebbe hat so angesagt, nur Chaim, Chaim. Und der Rebbe hat geantwortet. Und mit gesungen Nigunim, die war gesungen Nigunim. Mit Amor, sich weggestellt, von der Unterschieden, stellt sich auf, stellt sich auf und sagt, Rebbe, wir wollen ihr so sagen, am einmal Chassidus. Als ich das so getan, geworden still, dort ein paar Minuten, wenn still, der Rebbe hat genommen den Mic in Hand und hat so getan, die erste Wörter gedenkt, er gesagt, geschrieben, der Rebbe, das schwer, in dem Maimer, wo es hat herausgegeben zu der Jahrzeit von SHevat, wo sie will gar nach Hause haben. Und er hat gesagt, das Stück sein von Rayat, nachher hat er gesagt, sein Bier von Enskin, das so.
Bossi legani achese Kalo, sagt er auf der Rufe mit der Schraba von Nord, als legani in Ksifkan. Neuerdens steht legani, lignuni. Das ist lemokim, shohoya yikre batchilo. Warum Iker Schino ist betachtein im Haus. Ist damit der Rebbe der Schwer und sagt, Iker Schino betachtein im Haus. Oder Iker ist upnimis, was da in dem Linie von Schino ist, Davke oder der Linie, wo ist gewähnt, Davke betachtein. Wer bringt weiter ab vom Medrisch, als Iker Schino betachtein im Haus. Bis wann ist sie gewähnt der Cherte Zadas, ist hat demot in Jotme Misale gewähnt die Schiene von Oretz Lorakia. Wo das ist gewähnt der Iker Hasiluk, Punkt wie bepasst ist, der Cherte Zadas gewähnt der Siebe. Und der Nisina Smokim, also der noch konnte sein der Chetzkais, Hevel und Chetamabel mit Totediale. Was am Misale gewähnt der noch von Rekia, Alef Lebeis und Azei Hecher, is ot azay zeichet in dem Pnimisoinien. Is was sie gewähnt der Rikerinien Hasilo, ki das hat das alles, was hat sich auch getan betachtein, was mit Mesale gewähnt, die Schchina von Elam Hase, von dem Elam Hase Atacht. Dennoch sagt bis wann ist eine gekommen sein Tzadikim und haben zurück Mamschir gewähnt, die Schchina von Rekia hat sein Levov und sie weiter und der Rebbe macht davon Bekitzer. Bis wann ist sie gekommen, Mesher Rabbeinu, was Kol Hashvin Chvivin, und hat Mamschir gewähnt die Schchina von Rekia Halle Floretz. Stellt auf drauf der Rebbe in Chatzoi Igo, was Kol Hashvin Chvivin. Der Fund, wo der Loschen ist, nicht Kol HaChvivin Schwivin, nur Kol HaSchwivin Chvivin, ist ach Maschma, was de Meile Bose, ist ach das, was ist a Schwi. Was Lichiere ist ach das a Yinyin, was das nicht wie Pchirose. Beschaß, mir sagt auf a Sache, dass a Sache Choviv, kann so das ein a Yinyin, was gewinnt tolle Birzene, über Avidose, über Pchirose. Beschaß, aber mir sagt, was ist das a Chvives? Dafür, was ist a Schwi, und das, was ist a Schwi, kommt so das Betulde. Das, was mir sagt, a Meile auf Schwi, ist in der Ruf Guffe, ist nicht der Meile von Rischen. Warum mir sagt, was ist der Choviv, dafür, was ist a Schwi, lo Rischen. Und mit was gewinnt hat die Chvives, was lo Rischen geht, auf Avrom Avinu, bringt dort der Rebbe auf im Eimer, was Avrom Avinu gewinnt, wie das beim Mesiras Nefesh. Stellt aber der Rebbe rein, dass nicht gewinnt, wie der Mesiras Nefesh von Rebbe Akiva, vor dem Mesiras Nefesh von Rebbe Akiva gewinnt, was gesucht im Minion von Mesiras Nefesh. Mosi Jovele Yodi Vaikai Menu. Maschinkin Avrom Avinu Mesiras Nefesh, das gewinnt bei Mayinin bei der Chagar. Hat gewusst, dass der Wede darf sein, Vayikra schon beschem Hawaii, Keleilom, Altikra Vayikra, Ele Vayakri, als andere sollen noch ihm schreien, Bemele ist gegangen in Lavidose. Hat gemacht bei der Chagewainie von Messias Nefesh, hat sich nicht gefällt. Is hat der Linie von Messias Nefesh, das auf sehr viel der Iker, Kol Hoaveda, als viele Beschaß meret wegen Mesher Rabbeinu, was die Sache steht in uns Nater al Yodei. Farvos, der Favas Kol Ashvin Chvivin, sagt man auf dem beim Kem Gdele Maltameid, und man sagt, was ist der Meile von Kol Ashvin, oder das, was Ashvin lorischen. Das ist, als bei viele Bibchirose nicht, und bei Vidose nicht. Nur wenn dann mir bekommt fertige Heid, soll man nicht meinen, als er dämmelt ist mit einem Mugbo. Es kann sein, als in Joni, was nicht fleißig ist, sagt man auf der Ruf und Chsidis, bringt das herab in das Acheter, als jeder, da viele Schiffko, kann sagen, Mossi, ja, gehe Meise, Avese, Avraham, Yitzchak, wie Yankiv. Auf drauf meinten bei uns mehr nicht, dass die Hakore, wir sollen alle wissen, wir sind gefunden sich in dem der Hashvi. Was für was wird es angerufen mit der Hashvi, dass es mal los ist, und das was Shvi Rischen. Was gewähnt der Hanoge von dem Rischen, als viele Ahinen von Messias Nefesh hat nicht gesucht. Hat noch gewusst, was darf sein Minin Altikro va Yikro, Ela va Yakri, also kommen in der Nord, was man weiß nicht von Göttlichkeit, was man weiß nicht von Niedigkeit. Was man weiß, viele nicht wegen an alles weiß. Sagt dort soll sich ablegen im Ganzen an der Seite. Und Chosha viele bekommt ihm zu gehen und weiß dem interische Bixav. Dort steht Befehl, ich war Yikro, als sie genug als soll rufen. Sagt ihm, nein, alt Yikro, war Yikro, du willst, dass dir so lang in der war Yikro. Ist war Yakri. Darfst du sehen, also die, was haben bis sich von gar nicht gewusst, sollen sehen gehen in die Gassen und schreien, als Hawaii, Kel, Elam, Anit, Elam ist eine besondere Sache. Also ich habe der Ramban, Anit, Elam ist eine besondere Sache. Und Elikus ist eine besondere Sache. Nur dann, dass sie Mischel geschehen und auf Elam, nur dann, das und Elam ist dieselbe Sache. Und hat die Hanhogi, was der Rischen hat uns bewiesen, und was uns bewiesen, der Rebbe, ist, dass das man sich von dem jeden, was gefühlt sich in dem der Schwie, als Chosha viele fühlten sich nicht keine Kirche und fühlten sich nicht keine Unionen, und schreit mir an die Umani und hat Reis auf der Ruf. Sagt mir nema, wie bald, da du bist Lebi Pchirosa, bist du der Schwie, von dem und dem, die Schaß, was schon ist getroffen, die Welt. Ich darf jeder von uns nehmen auf sich, auf der Däminen Havede, und hat ihm gegeben Kirchis auf der Ruf, warum sich in der Schwie, als darf in sich wissen, dass er Schwie ist, was wie viel Mord für ihn ist gegossen. Und unter dem wird können nehmen, einteilen, aufteilen, sein Heilig in unter der Minion vom Mamschir sein, dem Schien oder Mato, Belam Hase, Hagashmi, Vachumri.
SHevat, Toshin Ches, was on a Friday. So Thursday night, the Rebbe, as on every SHevat, the Rebbe led the services, led the davening, was the Shliach Tzibur for Ma'ariv, Shachris, and Mincha. And I remember the davening was upstairs in what we call the smallest shul upstairs, across from the Rebbe's office. And I remember where I stood, exactly on the wall opposite the Omud, and I could see the door, and Rebbe would come in, And here were all the people, hundreds of people waiting for the second when we'd see the Rebbe's face and the Rebbe would walk in. And the Omid was prepared with a beautiful, beautiful white linen cover, and there were the big candles, and there was a sense of serenity and, of course, great seriousness and great holiness and sanctity as we waited for the minute when the Rebbe is going to walk in. And the Rebbe walked in, walked over to the Omid, and began the davening, and everybody davened. And I remember those moments. The Rebbe finished the davening and then walked back and walked into his room. And I left, and I went to my home. I lived with my parents in an apartment on Bergen Street, 6-7 blocks the other way of Eastern Parkway, near Nostrand Avenue. It was a long walk. I was 18 years old, and I was thinking about what I had seen. I was thinking about the Rebbe, so the Rebbe's face, and the Rebbe's davening, the beauty, and the scene was awesome, and the holiness was touching, was to be felt. And I was thinking to myself as I was walking home, I wonder what the Rebbe is doing right now. This is certainly a very, very sacred night to the Rebbe, the night of the yahrzeit of his father-in-law, about whom we speak so much, and it was his Rebbe and our Rebbe, and what it means to him. And certainly I thought of the Rebbe now being certainly delved into the highest, deepest levels of spiritual accomplishment. And I was to find out, wouldn't take long until I would find out exactly what the Rebbe was doing. I came to my home, to my parents' apartment at 1120 Bergen Street, and walked up the stairs, and I came into the apartment, and my parents were not home. And so I was in the apartment getting a meal ready for myself, and the phone rang. And it was Rabbi Groner. And Rabbi Groner greeted me and asked me if my father is home. I said, no, he's not home. So Rabbi Groner said to me, I have a message for him from the Rebbe. And it so happens that I had an older sister, Aleha HaShalom, who has since passed on. And at that time she was very ill. She was in hospital. And Rabbi Groner said to me, I was just by the Rebbe in his office, and Rebbe asked me to make a call to your home to ask your father how your sister is. And he asked me to report back to him. So please, he asked me, when your father comes home, please have him call me so I can tell the Rebbe what he wants to know. And that is what the Rebbe was doing on SHevat at night.
וכל זין הגודל בישראל וגודל והמיתות של דובר שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו ובהם זול nie sein der Ringe von Nisim, dass sie כל זין dienen, was hat mit sich nicht יברך לך אדוני וישמרך יאיר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקו איש אדוני בשעת הרצח והנושי בישראל alle עניונים וספיות kon nicht vertragen, da soll nicht spielen in kol hamishomische Klubes. Und in der Ruba steht die Schlimme Sanoshi. Der Fuhl versteht mir nicht, der Gebel Achrei ist, was haben wir die alle, was sie sein, was sie haben sich gewählt und sie gefühlen sich bedeutet. Was auch ist der Gebel, nicht nur die, was haben gesehen, der Chaim Zaklos. Und die werden Dämmel von dem Tee. Aber viele nicht nur die, was haben die Frau gesehen, der Chaim Zaklos, die Klonus, was Dämmel sagte, der Rebbe, Shalmaris, Ideen, Shal Tzadikin, die bringt darauf, Teva, Bareva, Matosnezei, Gebet. Hoste, du konntest aufrufen, Lachas Mann. Aber viele, die, was haben nicht sicher gewesen zu dem Bechaio, oder seien geboren geworden, wo Jachri ist al Kusri, Teirose, was wie Teire, das wie gerät frie in die Loschen Heiror, als mit Mikaile ha-Herois Shelei, is orthodox heist am Kusher, Durum Druch was mahalt gekommen die Teirose, die Han Hoggeso, וכל ההירואית והתהירונת ביחדו, כדוס ישולם להפריטי טרחמים רבים פונוסי הזה, וכלי קדוש הדרוך עבור עצמם של זה, ברוכו לכל ערכות ביחד, וכל נביתם המצטרף להם מנפש ויד בוטו.
You need to unmute, Rabbi. Rabbi, you need to unmute. Okay, good.
Vivian, awesome. Well, I wanted to make a l'chaim. This was very special to be with everyone and for us to celebrate this. So l'chaim on the special day of the 10th of Shvat, each and every one of you are an inspiration to me, and each and every one of you propel me forward. So as I celebrate my birthday, as I celebrate a new year and more wisdom, I look to all of you for my inspiration. And I want to say Yasher Koach. I'll make a l'chaim to each and every one of you. As we just heard from the Rebbe, we each have a collective shared mission, which is to get the job done, to bring the final redemption, to bring the ultimate revelation of godliness in our world, that it shouldn't just be something we trust, we believe, but it should be something we see with our own physical eyes, and something we could point and say, wow, look, we got it done, and we're in that time of celebration. So l'chaim, we should have that very soon, and I wish each and every one of you good health and continued growth in your spiritual journey, and you should have also material success in your efforts, in your businesses, in your family life, in your health, and everything else should be in its fullest and an abundant measure. L'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, Mark, it's great to see you. My Talmud Chavrusa, my buddy for studying Talmud. I learn a lot from Mark, and Yasher Koach. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Madeline. L'chaim, l'chaim. All right, everyone, have a good evening. Thank you for joining. Just a reminder, God willing, January 26th, we're already getting a lot of requests for more information. Journey through Jewish music. We've had it before COVID. It was very popular. We did that in person. Now we're going to do it over Zoom with Howard Rachelson. It's on a Wednesday evening, January 26th. You don't want to miss it. It's going through Jewish history through the lens of Jewish music. It's really, really cool. Howard does an awesome job at it. And then the following week on February 1st, we have From Rapper to Rabbi, a Chabad rabbi. His name is Rabbi Mati. He was a drug dealing rapper teenager, and his journey, how he found his roots and actually became a Chabad rabbi. And now he himself is helping young teens as a youth director at Chabad in Virginia. It's incredible. Sorry, in Delaware. It's incredible, his story. He's spoken with hundreds of communities already. He'll be on Zoom on February 1st, God willing. So a lot of exciting stuff coming up. And Yasher Koach, l'chaim, and a good evening, everyone. L'chaim, l'chaim. Thank you, Joni, l'chaim. Bye, Steve.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
For Tanya. Bye, Menucha. Bye, my dear mother. Bye, Safta. And bye, Dr. Sapin. A good Yom Tov, a happy Yud Shvat, and bye, Aviva.
Yeah. Well, that's so far, that's the only bowel movement that I have.